Imagine, just for a second, that you are standing in this vast ancient library.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. So the air is thick with dust, and the shelves are just crammed with thousands of these crumbling manuscripts. You pull a scroll off the shelf, expecting, I don't know, a dusty historical record or maybe a simple children's fable.
Yeah, like an old fairy tale.
Exactly. But as you begin to read, you realize you aren't looking at a history book at all. You're actually looking into a mirror. And the reflection staring back at you is this profound, incredibly realistic, and honestly, sometimes terrifyingly dark portrait of modern human psychology.
That's such a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Because it really is a mirror that, strips away all our contemporary technological advancements. It takes away our smartphones, our modern social structures, and it just shows us the raw machinery of human nature.
Yeah, just the bare bones.
Right. And the deeper you look into these specific texts, the more obvious it becomes that this machinery, well, it hasn't changed a bit in a few millennia.
It really hasn't, and that is the perfect way to frame what we're doing today. For this deep dive, we are opening up a stack of ancient texts known as the Jatakas.
These are fascinating.
They really are. Basically, they're a massive collection of Buddhist tales from India, traditionally said to detail the previous lives of the Buddha before he attained enlightenment.
Right. And in these past lives, he appears in all sorts of forms, like sometimes as a wise sage, sometimes as an animal, or, sometimes as a king.
Exactly. And on the surface, they sound like simple morality tales. But our mission today is to really dig into the actual source material to extract the most practical, surprising, and frankly brutal insights about who we are.
The really gritty stuff.
Yeah. We're exploring the anatomy of greed, the lethal danger of foolishness, and the incredibly grueling journey to true self-mastery.
I think to appreciate the gravity of these texts, you really have to understand the unique backdrop against which they're set. Like in the world of Jatakas, the traditional hierarchy of nature is completely upended.
Oh, totally flipped on its head.
Right. The animals in these stories consistently display far more nobility, restraint, and respect for boundaries than the humans do.
Which is saying something about us.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And another crucial element is how they define wisdom itself. So forget about mystical or magical powers. In these stories, wisdom is the rigorous, almost scientific observation of cause and effect.
It's pure logic.
Exactly. It's that rare ability to look at a situation, strip away all emotion or wishful thinking, and just see exactly where a chain of physical or psychological events is going to lead.
Let's actually start right there with cause and effect.
Yeah.
Because the sources tell us that before we can even begin to tackle human malice and greed, we have to look out for a much more common danger in our everyday lives.
The stuff we see all the time.
Right. Just pure, unadulterated foolishness and a total lack of foresight.
Oh, yeah.
There is this story in the texts called the Sakuchajaka, or the story of the birds in the tree, that illustrates this brilliantly.
I love this one.
So the Buddha in this past life is born as a wise bird. He's the leader of this massive flock, living in a giant ancient tree with heavy branching boughs.
Like a whole avian city.
Yeah, pretty much. So one day, a strong wind is blowing, and the wise bird notices that two of the thickest branches are just grinding against each other.
They're rubbing so hard that wood dust is starting to fall.
Right.
And then, a faint whisk of smoke appears.
Right.
It's a very subtle detail in the environment, but it's an incredibly consequential one if you understand the physics of friction.
Exactly. So the wise bird immediately calls the flock together and says, "We have to leave. Now these branches are breeding the seeds of fire."
He sees the whole chain reaction.
He does. He says, "If this continues, sparks will fall on the dry leaves below, and our trusted stronghold is going to become a death trap." He warns them that safety is only found in flight. But the other birds, the foolish ones, they just laugh at him.
Of course they do.
They mock him. They say he's always paranoid, always seeing crocodiles in a single drop of water. They actively choose to, well, basically ignore the physical evidence right in front of them.
Because they see the smoke, but they refuse to acknowledge the fire that inevitably follows.
Yeah.
So the wise birds fly away, and the foolish birds stay.
And we know how that ends.
Right. Just as predicted, the friction sparks a flame, the tree catches fire, the birds are blinded by the smoke, and they perish in the flames.
It's dark.
It is. But the text is offering a very specific definition of foolishness here. It isn't a low IQ or a lack of formal education, it's willful blindness.
Wisdom, as demonstrated by the bird leader, is situational awareness. It's projecting the present moment into the future based on the laws of physics.
Right.
And, the world is full of people who will watch the branches grind, smell the smoke, and still mock you for buying a fire extinguisher.
That is so true. And that kind of willful blindness is dangerous to be around. But the sources actually introduce us to a type of fool that is exponentially more dangerous than someone who simply ignores a warning.
Oh, man. You're talking about the helpful fool.
Yes, the fool who's actively trying to help you.
I'm so glad you brought this up. The texts give us two stories that are honestly hilarious but just incredibly grim. Let's look at the Makasa Jataka.
Okay.
So there's a father and son working in the woods. A mosquito lands on the father's bald head and bites him. The father complains, and the son, really wanting to be helpful, says, "Don't worry, I'll get it."
So he grabs a deadly heavy axe, takes a massive swing at the mosquito, and just cleaves his father's skull in twain.
It's horrible, but it's meant to be absurd.
Right. A flawless victory over the insect, but a catastrophic failure for the father. And the real tragedy is the son probably thought he was doing a great job right up until the impact.
Exactly. Then there's the Aramadusaka Jataka. A king's gardener wants to take a holiday, so he asks a troop of monkeys who live in the garden if they can water the young trees while he's gone.
This is a recipe for disaster.
Right. The monkeys eagerly agree. But then they start thinking about efficiency. They don't want to waste water, so they ask themselves, how do we know exactly how much water each tree needs?
And their solution is pure, unadulterated madness.
Total madness.
They pull every single young tree up by the roots, measure the size of the root system, pour water accordingly, and then shove the dead trees back into the dirt. They completely annihilate the garden in their enthusiastic attempt to be, good stewards.
This reminds me so much of modern corporate psychology.
Oh,
We
absolutely.
could call this the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people lack the competence to even recognize their own incompetence. Or think about a middle manager who micromanages a delicate project to death.
Yes.
They demand so many progress reports and metrics that they pull the project up by the roots just to see how it's growing. And in doing so, they kill it.
That corporate analogy is just spot on because the middle manager genuinely wants the project to succeed, just like the monkeys wanted the trees to thrive. But because they don't understand the underlying ecosystem of the work, their intervention is fatal. Measuring the wrong thing in the wrong way is worse than not measuring at all.
Okay, but I gotta play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
In our modern culture, we give a ton of grace to people if their heart is in the right place. We always say, well, they meant well, or give them a break, they were just trying to help.
Right. Intent is everything today.
Exactly. So why are these ancient texts so utterly ruthless toward people who are just trying to help? Doesn't intent matter at all?
So in Buddhist philosophy, good intentions without the foundation of knowledge are actively destructive. Intention is not a magical shield that protects you from the laws of cause and effect.
Oh, yeah.
If you swing an axe at a man's head, the physics of the axe blade do not care that your emotional intention was aimed at a mosquito. The text actually explicitly states, sense-lacking friends are worse than foes with sense.
Because an enemy is predictable.
Precisely. If you are dealing with a known enemy, a soul with sense, you understand their motives. You know they want to harm you, so you put up your guard, you set firm boundaries, and you navigate around them carefully.
You're on high alert.
Right. But an ignorant friend bypasses all of your natural defenses because you trust them. They're a wild card. You hand them the keys to your garden, or you let them stand behind you with a deadly weapon because you falsely believe their good intentions will somehow magically produce good outcomes.
And the Jatakas are basically saying, don't do that.
Exactly. They're warning you that placing trust in a fool's good intentions is a guaranteed recipe for ruin.
Sense-lacking friends are worse than foes with sense. Man, that is really going to stick with me. But, okay, if fools are a wild card, the sources show us that the smart but greedy are a total contagion.
Oh, completely.
Let's look at the danger of calculated malice and unbridled desire, particularly in the story called the Vidabha Jataka.
This one is, honestly, a masterclass in psychological thrillers.
It really is. So we have a Brahmin, which in this context is an ancient scholar or priest who knows a magical charm. If he recites it while looking at the sky during a specific planetary conjunction, it literally rains wealth from the heavens.
We're talking gold, silver, pearls, coral, diamonds, just pouring from the sky.
Exactly. So he and his pupil, who is the Buddha in a past life, are traveling when they are captured by a gang of 500 robbers known as the Dispatchers. They hold the Brahmin hostage and send the pupil to get ransom money.
And the pupil warns his master, right?
Yes, he warns him not to use the charm under any circumstances while he's gone.
Let me guess. He gets impatient waiting for the ransom.
He absolutely gets impatient. The planetary alignment happens, and he just uses the charm. Treasure rains from the sky. The robbers suddenly have more wealth than they could ever spend in 10 lifetimes.
And you would assume they just pack up the gold and walk away.
But they don't, because another gang of robbers sees the treasure, attacks the first gang, and captures the Brahmin. The Brahmin admits he can't make it rain treasure again for another year, so the new robbers kill him on the spot.
Typical greedy logic.
Then they hunt down the original robbers, and an absolute bloodbath ensues. The greed operates like a virus. 500 men slaughter each other until only 2 are left standing with all the treasure.
And those 2 guys don't exactly live happily ever after either.
Not at all. These 2 survivors hide the loot in the jungle. One stays to guard it while the other goes to a village to get food. The one in the village thinks, hey, if I poison his rice, I keep it all.
And the one in the jungle thinks, when he gets back, I'll chop him in half with my sword and keep it all.
Yes.
It's a perfect fatal symmetry.
The guy comes back with the poisoned rice, gets chopped in half, and then the murderer sits down, eats the poisoned rice, and dies right next to the treasure. Every single person who touched the wealth was annihilated by their own insatiable greed.
It's such a bleak but accurate picture of greed.
And for literature fans listening, this specific ancient text is actually recognized by scholars as an early ancestor of Geoffrey Chaucer's The Pardoner's Tale from the Canterbury Tales, which was written centuries later in medieval England.
Oh, really? That's incredible.
Yeah. The mechanics of human greed are so universal that the exact same narrative resonates across completely different eras and continents.
Well, the text brilliantly isolates greed as a fundamentally irrational force. Greed overrides the most basic human instinct, which is survival. Like the robbers had already won. They had the wealth.
They were set for life.
Right. But the nature of this kind of craving is that it's never about having enough. It's always about having more. Greed narrows your worldview until only 2 things exist: you and the object of your desire.
And everyone else is just an obstacle.
Exactly. It destroys all social contracts, all logic, and ultimately yourself. And this brings us back to the contrast we mentioned earlier between humans and animals.
Yeah.
Animals generally operate according to natural boundaries. When a lion is full, it stops hunting. But human craving has no natural boundary. It is a bottomless void.
That concept of the bottomless void is painfully obvious in the Silvanaga Jataka, the story of the elephant and the forester.
Oh, this one is tough to read.
It is. The Buddha is born as this magnificent white elephant, the good king elephant, living deep in the Himalayas. One day, he hears a man weeping. It's a forester from Benares who is hopelessly lost and starving.
So the elephant steps in to help.
Yeah. Moved by pure compassion, he calms the terrified man, takes him to his own dwelling, feeds him for days, and then literally carries him on his massive back out of the jungle to the safety of the human road.
And he specifically asks the man not to tell anyone where he lives.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's seeking only peace and solitude in return for saving the man's life.
But the man gets back to the city, wanders into the ivory workers' bazaar, and asks what a living elephant's tusk is actually worth.
He immediately looks for a way to profit.
Exactly. They tell him it's worth a fortune. So this completely ungrateful forester packs a saw and goes right back into the jungle. He finds the elephant and whines that he is destitute and needs a piece of ivory to survive.
And the elephant's reaction is just unbelievable.
The elephant says he'll give him a whole tusk if he has a saw. The elephant actually bows down on the earth, and the man saws off both of his magnificent tusks.
Because the elephant gives them willingly, hoping this act of supreme charity will bring him closer to ultimate wisdom.
Right. So the man sells the ivory, spends all the money, and comes back.
Yeah.
He complains that the money only paid his debts, and he needs the rest of the ivory.
He just won't stop.
The elephant yields again, and the man saws away the rest of the tusks. He sells that, spends it, and comes back a 3rd time. This time he says he can't make a living and demands the stumps of the tusks.
It's just sickening.
The elephant lies down, and this vile man climbs onto the elephant's face, kicks away the flesh at the roots, and saws the stumps right out of the elephant's skull. He takes them and walks away. But the text says that the solid earth, which can bear the weight of massive mountains, could not bear the burden of this man's staggering wickedness.
The earth literally rejects him.
Yes, As soon as he is out of the elephant's sight, the earth literally bursts open in a yawning chasm, and flames from nethermost hell wrap him in a shroud and swallow him whole.
It's such a visceral cinematic conclusion.
Mm,
And the tree fairy, witnessing this, utters a really profound truth. Ingratitude lacks more the more it gets. Not all the world can glut its appetite.
that's a powerful line.
It really forces us to ask questions about modern consumerism and, the architecture of our own desires. We're surrounded by economic systems entirely designed to manufacture discontent.
We always need the newest phone or the better car.
Exactly. The forester represents a psychological void that just cannot be filled by external acquisition. The ivory wasn't the problem. The gaping hole in the man's character was the problem. If you feed an endless void, it doesn't fill up. It just expands to demand more.
So we're looking at a world filled with willfully blind fools ignoring smoke, dangerous helpers swinging axes, and people whose greed is so bottomless that the earth has to open up and swallow them.
It's a scary place.
How on earth does a person survive in this environment? Well, the overarching thesis of the Jatakas is that you cannot control the burning trees, the foolish friends, or the greedy robbers of the world. The only true victory, the only conquest that actually matters, is conquering your own mind.
And this brings us to one of the most relatable and psychologically astute stories in the entire collection. The Kudala Jataka, or the Spade Sage.
I have to admit, I actually struggled with this one at first.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, there's this gardener who makes a meager living growing vegetables. His only possession of any real value is his favorite, slightly blunt gardening spade. One day he decides he wants to seek higher spiritual truth, so he hides his spade, renounces the world, and becomes an ascetic monk.
A classic spiritual journey.
Right. But after a while, he starts thinking about that spade. He misses his garden. The attachment to this completely mundane object becomes so incredibly strong that he abandons his monastic vows, digs up the spade, and goes back to being a gardener.
It's a classic case of romanticizing the past.
But here's the part that threw me. It doesn't happen just once. He does this 6 times.
6 times.
6 times he renounces the world, and 6 times the psychological pull of this blunt little shovel drags him back. Why is this ancient text spending so much time on a guy obsessed with a gardening tool?
Because it understands the psychology of mundane attachments perfectly. The most difficult things to walk away from aren't usually grand, dramatic vices. They're the small, familiar comforts that tether us to our previous identities.
Oh, that makes sense.
The spade represents the safety of the known. He tells himself he's a monk, but as long as he knows exactly where that spade is buried, he always has an escape hatch back to his old, comfortable life.
And on the 7th attempt, he finally realizes that as long as the spade is accessible, he will never be free of his attachment. So he takes the spade, walks to the edge of a massive, fast-flowing river, shuts his eyes incredibly tight, spins the spade around his head, and hurls it with all his might into the middle of the river.
The detail of him shutting his eyes is so brilliant.
It really is.
He knows his own weakness so intimately that he realizes if he even sees where it lands in the water, he'll be tempted to dive in and fish it out later. He has to completely blind himself to its trajectory to ensure the break is final.
And the moment he throws it, he screams out at the top of his lungs, "I have conquered! I have conquered!"
Such a triumphant moment.
Now, the timing is perfect because the king of Benares happens to be riding by on his elephant, returning from a bloody military campaign where he just crushed a rebellion. The king hears this peasant in rags shouting about a victory, and he's intrigued.
He's probably thinking, what victory?
Yeah, he brings the man over and says, "I am a conqueror. I just won a war. Who exactly did you conquer?"
And the Spade Sage tells the king that 1,000 battlefield victories are meaningless if a man has not conquered the lusts and attachments within his own heart.
The king looks at his massive army, looks at his bloody victory, and realizes the peasant is right. The king actually says, true conquest lasts forevermore, meaning that conquering your own mind is a permanent victory, whereas conquering a physical territory just means you have to fight to defend it again tomorrow.
This blunt spade is a brilliant metaphor for the trivial attachments that hold us back from our own potential today. We all have one.
We really do.
It might be a toxic job that pays just enough to keep us comfortable, but entirely miserable. It might be a bad relationship we keep returning to just because it's familiar territory. Or, it might just be the dopamine hit of scrolling on our smartphones for 4 hours a day.
Yes, exactly.
We keep hiding the spade under a thin layer of dirt, telling ourselves we can walk away whenever we want, but we keep going back to dig it up.
We leave the apps on the home screen just in case we never actually throw the phone in the river. The text is telling us that true power isn't about accumulating external weapons or wealth to protect ourselves. It's about developing an internal state that is immune to external circumstances. Which brings us to our final, very brief story, the Panyavuda Jataka, or Prince, 5 Weapons.
A great way to wrap this up.
The prince is walking through a forest when he is confronted by a massive, terrifying ogre. The prince shoots poisoned arrows at it, but they just stick harmlessly in the ogre's matted fur. He strikes it with a sword, a spear, and a club. Every single weapon gets stuck in the monster's sticky hair.
So his external arsenal completely fails him.
Completely. He is completely unarmed, staring down a monster that fully intends to eat him. But he doesn't flinch.
He stands his ground.
Yeah. The ogre is deeply confused and asks why he isn't terrified. The prince says, because within my body is a sort of adamant which you will never digest. He is talking about the internal sword of knowledge.
I love that concept.
His mind is so disciplined and unshakable that he feels zero fear, and this psychological absolute actually intimidates the monster into backing down and letting him go. But how does that actually work? How does not being afraid stop a physical monster?
Well, think about the power dynamics of a predator and prey. Predators operate on a very specific algorithm. They intimidate, the prey panics, and the predator strikes.
Okay, I follow.
When the prince refuses to show fear, he breaks the algorithm.
Yeah.
The ogre expects a terrified victim. By maintaining complete internal control, the prince signals that he possesses a power the ogre cannot comprehend. The psychological absolute disrupts the monster's natural behavior.
That is fascinating.
So whether you are facing the impending fire of grinding tree branches, the destructive acts of a foolish friend, the bottomless greed of a rogue, or a literal monster in the forest, external wealth, physical weapons, and other people's good intentions are ultimately unreliable.
They can all fail you.
Exactly. The Jatakas teach us that the only truly reliable defense mechanism is an unshakable, disciplined mind that understands cause and effect and has severed its attachments to the trivial things that drag it down.
To bring it all together for you listening, watch out for the friction that starts the fire. Don't be the bird that mocks the smoke. Beware the help of fools, because good intentions cannot alter the physics of a swinging axe.
Very true.
Remember that greed destroys itself. It is a void that will eventually swallow you whole. And most importantly, recognize that true victory isn't found in acquiring more things or defeating others. It is found in mastering yourself.
As we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final question to mull over on your own.
Okay.
We talked about the Spade sage abandoning his vows 6 times for a mundane object because it represented the comfort of the known.
Yeah.
In your own life right now, what is your blunt spade? What is that one seemingly insignificant attachment, habit, or comfort zone that you keep returning to, digging it up just when you thought you had finally moved on?
Such a great question to reflect on.
And more importantly, what would it actually take for you to close your eyes, spin it around your head, and throw it into the river for good?
Think about that the next time you look into the mirror of these ancient texts. You might just find the reflection staring back at you is a little sharper, a little wiser, and ready to walk out of that dusty library and into the light. Until next time.